welcome to Stories Found. Each week we feature funny stories, plays, and sketches from some of the most talented comedy writers in the world. I'm your host, Ava Love Hanna, a writer and humorist in Austin, Texas. Joining me is my writing partner, audio engineer, and all-around cool guy, Paul Hanna. You're listening to Stories Found. Our featured organization this week is McCallum Fine Arts Academy. The mission of the Academy is to foster and advance a diverse group of student artists who will create, lead, inspire, and contribute to a global community. If you're in the Austin area and want to know more about their advanced fine arts curriculum for your student, visit mccallumfinearts.austinschools.org. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Stories Found. This week we're talking to the uber-talented writer Jeff Knight before hearing his fantastic story, Bella and Blue. Jeff is a storyteller, poet, songwriter, and aspiring novelist in Austin, Texas. He's currently working on a murder mystery set in the world of craft beer and featuring an intrepid Great Dane as part of a heroic crime-fighting duo. Jeff is funny, smart, and just an amazingly kind and talented human. He's the kind of writer that every other writer wants to be. I've been a fan of Jeff's work for years, so it's been a real treat to not only get to know him, but to have him here on Stories Found today. Hey, Jeff, welcome to Stories Found.
Super happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we are excited to have you here today to chat with us about your story, Bella and Blue. We're all longtime fans of your work, and it's a real privilege to have you here today.
But for me as well. So yeah, this is great.
Well, without giving too much away, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story. What are we going to hear today? So
the theme for this story was for a night of stories on songs that were. The story is about the song and the song is about the story. Mm-hmm. And I had written a song, just the kind of goofy song that we all do when we sing to our pets, about these two Great Danes that we had. Mm-hmm. And the song kind of weirdly became a hit in our family life and our group of friends. And, you know, there were moments where I would be at open mics and this little thing that I thought of as this ditty, this goofy little thing that I'd just done with the pets became actually one of my real songs that I would play for people and it would go over pretty well. And the story is about my relationship with the dogs and my relationship with songwriting and how those two things came together in this song, Bella and Blue.
Well, it's a fantastic story. And it's funny and it's touching and it's a really beautiful tribute to these amazing animals all at the same time. And I won't lie. Like, I knew it was going to be about dogs who had passed. So I had the story and I avoided listening to it for a few days because I was like, I can't do this, man. And I thought, oh, it's going to be so sad. But it wasn't. It was, yes, there's loss in the story, but you sort of carry us through it without dwelling on the loss part. So it's never really sad. It's this funny celebration of life. How on earth, as a writer, I ask, how on earth are you able to write about sad things with this grace? Was this a difficult story for you to tell?
It was and it wasn't. Like it was in the sense that it's hard to talk about things that are emotional and involve mm-hmm. loss, but the dogs were such positive, goofy, sweet beings. They brought so much great energy into our house. And at the point where I first told the story, actually, I had done a version of it years ago mm-hmm. at Bulb Story Slam that used to be at Ground Floor Theater. Mm-hmm. And for when I did that one, Bella was still around. And so the end of the story was, you know, Bella's still with us, blah, 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 just the various things about Bella. And, then when I was thinking about wanting to do one on the intersection of the relationship with these animals and the song that came out of it, and that theme really spoke to me. And I wanted to make it about how a song can capture a moment in your life. And then that moment's with you all the time, anytime you sing that song. And so I think the musical element and the fact that there had been a little distance with this version between when the dogs had passed and when I told the story, that helped me not be too over focused on the darker side of it.
Yeah, I had a wonderful poetry teacher when I was in the writing program at the University of Houston, and he used to say, everything you live at some point will become a poem. Some things just need some distance. So exactly,
Yeah,
I
so
find
true.
how far removed do you often need to be from something in order to write about it? Does it depend on
Almost
the
always,
topic, or yeah?
almost always I write right away,
Oh
and
wow.
most of it's unusable. But there's something in there. There's something that I capture in the first scribblings that might make it through to a later revision. In this case, when I do storytelling, I'm not working from a word for word script.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have done that. I did a Listen to Your Mother show, and on that one,
Yes.
they want to, and I know you did that show as well, and my wife Tony did that show as well, and a bunch of really cool people have done that show, and I had so much good stuff there. But for that one, they wanted a written script that you read,
Right.
and I've done it that way, and I've done staged readings of things I've written that were, that I cast parts of, a story with different people doing different voices. But for storytelling, I really like extemporaneous delivery, where there's an outline and maybe there's a few phrases that are going to be the same way every time. But a lot of it is fresh prose in the moment coming out of my brain right now. And it to me, it feels dialogic with the audience.
Yes. And I think it depends on your audience too. That's what I love about being able to sort of shift your story towards the vibe that night. Because there have been times when, I've had to tell a story word for word. I'm like, the audience doesn't want this approach. What am I going to do? So
can't fix it in midstream.
Exactly. But Testify is amazing because they do want you to sort of to speak from the heart, and your story will vary a little bit depending on how you tell it. And man, to be able to connect with that audience, which you have an amazing gift for connecting with audiences. So
I thank you.
This is a fantastic story, and you can hear the audiences with you the entire time. So just wonderful.
There was a funny moment that I thought of just now as you were saying that, when in the story I talk about my songwriting career, which is meager. I mean, for the most part, I write songs that I play for my friends. I have recorded and put some things up, but it's not a hit, and I'm not going to tour. Like that's not really there for me. I'm a middle-aged guy, youngest kid's almost ready to go off to college. I'm still working a corporate job, but and so I'm making this point about how Bell and Blue was the sort of surprise hit for me in my very small circle, but I used to write songs, Schoolhouse Rock type songs for a multimedia company. And several people I had worked with at that job were at the storytelling performance that night. And so I had in mind to make just a little reference to, I even did this semi-professionally for a while with, but because friends of mine who really knew that work and that, Schoolhouse Rock type songs for middle school kids, I milked it a little bit. I did a little more with that line when I came to, my song about foreign policy challenges in the John Adams administration. And my friends who knew exactly what song I was talking about because they were in that job with me at the time really laughed, and it gave a boost. And it was one of those moments where you can, if those guys weren't here for the audience, I'd have said that line a little different. But since they're here, and that line goes right to them.
So, I used to coach public speaking, and there are some people who can speak off the cuff and there are some people who cannot. Like, they have to have a script. They just freeze when they're in front of an audience. Did this take practice for you? I'm always interested to know. Some people sort of have it or they don't. Being able to speak and connect with an audience the way you do, is that something that took practice, or has it always felt natural for you?
For extemporaneous delivery, I would say pretty natural. It was always true that if there's a class discussion and I read the material that day, I could jump in and participate effectively, and people would be interested in what I had to say, and it would be pretty much on point, and I might add a relevant observation or two. And so that's easy for me. But in fact, when I used to teach public speaking classes at UT, there was a research component to the class. It was the students had to be able to look up some sources and cite them correctly and have a speech outline. And I would always tell them, by the way, you're just doing that because the department requires it. In real life, Whenever you're asked to speak to something, it's because you're the one who knows about it. You're going to be asked to give a eulogy for your friend who passed. Well, you don't need research for that. Like the whole reason you're one of the people giving this toast at a wedding or a eulogy at a funeral or in a meeting with your boss and they say, how's that project going? Well, you're the one who knows about that project. And so most times you're called upon to speak. You're speaking about something where you have a lot of ethos already, and or they would ask somebody else, right? And so that part of it, connecting with the audience because I've got something I want to say, is pretty easy for me. It's a little different with scripted work. Then you have to, especially if it's like what we used to do at the Poetry Slam, where it's memorized word for word, and that's some work and some practice and some rehearsal.
Well, and I've had it both ways. I've had where I had to speak and I couldn't, oh man, am I going to lose my train of thought? But when you're in the moment, it's okay. But with scripted work, sometimes it is more challenging because if you lose your place, it's pretty obvious. So you skip a line or how are you going to fight your way back with that? So it was a running joke among the slam poets at the Electric Lounge that part of Ernie Klein's magic was you'd forget your line and you'd blank and you'd wait for it to come back, or you'd say the preceding sentence to kind of get a running start. Maybe the line will come this time. And Ernie would just go, "Oh man, what was it? No, it's coming to me. Give me a second." and then he would get it back, and somehow he was never penalized for it. The audience just loved him regardless. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I've been a fan of your work for years, and I actually first discovered you via your poetry with the Austin Poetry Slam. And I think one of the first poems I remember hearing was Footsteps. And just like this story, it was hilarious and poignant. I remember thinking, okay, oh my God, it was like that episode of The Simpsons where Bart has his Zen moment and everything just sort of makes sense for him. I was like, oh my God, I was an undergrad in a writing program. I was like, here's another writer who sees the world the same way I do. So this is awkward, but you're one of my main writing influences. But
I obviously love hearing that. So.
So who are some of your writing influences? Because you've worked with some amazing people.
I have. And first, let me just say though, it means the world to me that you say that. And because just like almost all musicians and almost all actors and almost all artists, almost all writers never get any recognition.
Right.
Like it's just the way of it. And it's so hard to get any attention, and you've put your heart into something and really, really want to connect with people. That's why we do it in the first place. And so, and there maybe are moments where some of that comes your way and you feel like, oh, my work is really connecting. Yay. But mostly no, right? Mostly it's
true.
It's hard. And so any kind of, hey, that really spoke to me, that any of us get, I know we love. So first I wanted to really, really thank you and acknowledge you for saying that. And then on the people I've worked with, when I went into the Austin Poetry Slam scene, I had done open mics like at Chicago House, and it was going under as part of the ongoing destruction of the beautiful literary culture of Austin, Texas.
Right.
And so I started going to the Electric Lounge for the Slam, which was a different scene, and it was just perfect timing. Like I made some of the best friends of my life in that scene. And then later when I started dating Tony, she came into that scene and blossomed and became a force. And she thought of it as it was like a theater snack. Like she wanted to do theater, but full-time job and raising kids, it wasn't really available to her to, how immersive it is. If you're in a show, there's the last few weeks of that's all you're doing. And so she couldn't do it. It was gone from her life. But she could go get a performance fix, But anyway, that scene was so much fun. And these are people that we wound up being in each other's weddings and babysitting each other's kids. And it really became a family of people for decades, that even after none of us are doing slam anymore, we're all still in each other's lives. And I just freaking love it. And then the first part of your question that I've rambled very far away from, my writing influence is, as a songwriter, and this story is about my songwriting largely. The Beatles are in a separate category. That's like saying, I really like the sun. Yeah, it provides life for this whole planet.
Right.
So the Beatles are like in another category. But I really like very literate singer-songwriter types.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like one of my favorites from middle school on was Jackson Browne. Still is.
Yeah.
I saw him recently when he came through town. And oh my God, he's in his mid-70s. He sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't do what he does. Like there's something about his voice and the fact that he is a multi-instrumentalist. And so I couldn't aspire to be like that. It was like, I really admire that, but that's not the kind of writer I'm going to be. For me, John Prine is the North Star.
Oh yeah.
There's some real emotion, and he talks about some real stuff, but there's also X amount of silliness. And he's a great singer who's not a great singer. Like think about the way really great singers sound. Like, I'm going to say Aretha Franklin or Paul McCartney or people like that that have amazing power and range and control, and they're always right on it. And John Prine is not that, right? It's kind of a homespun, weathered storyteller quality.
Right.
And that's like, when I fell in love with John Prine's music, I was like, that's something I could actually do. Mm-hmm. That's within my wheelhouse. And so for me as a songwriter, and certainly in not just in songwriting, but in tone on my other stuff, he's probably the North Star. But I really was into John Irving for a while and Ken Kesey. When I was in college, I read Alice Walker for the first time. Mm-hmm. She's got a story called Everyday Use, which is I don't know why that one just popped in my head, but there it is. But there's two daughters of an African-American family, and one has gone on to college and gotten a PhD and sort of didn't like the country ways of her family. Mm-hmm. And the other daughter stayed closer to home. And the situation of the story is the PhD daughter has come back and she wants, I can't remember if maybe it's a blanket, but it's some kind of homemade heirloom that their grandmother had made. Mm-hmm. And
I think it was a quilt. I do.
I think you're right. Mm-hmm. And she wants it because now she's sort of, having gone so far away from home and learned many things that aren't like the upbringing she wanted to move on from, she now appreciates it and she wants to have it. Right. And it seems like it's not fair. The daughter who appreciated it all along should have it, but they let the more scholarly daughter take it. And the other daughter, the one who's stuck close to home, says, "Yeah, I know how to make those." That's what I get out of it. Like I don't need that blanket because she taught me how to make them. Right. And I remember reading that story in college and just having my mind blown. Mm-hmm. And I was on the speech team, and I think one of my speech teammates maybe did that one for their prose interpretation performance. I discovered a lot of writers that way of being in that world. But that way that story talks about different ways you could think about heritage, what it means to want to move on and go find new things, and what it means to carry things with you. So I had a big Alice Walker phase in college, and I still like a lot of her writing. So that's a bunch of them. That's
perfect. And you know what's funny is, so I did forensics. I was on the speech team, and then I went on to coach. And when I first started coaching my first year, I was like, okay, guys, I'm going to blow your minds. We've got this really cool poet. And so I introduced your work to my speech team, and we actually had several students go on and do really well at nationals with your work. And that's the kind of thing that writers don't always get to hear about, right? That
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I had students who absolutely adored your work. I think he took several of your poems all the way to nationals. And so I think the speech team is where we do discover these fantastic things, not only about ourselves, but about the world and these other writers and these influences. So yeah, you're more famous than you know.
Well,
and we would have other schools come up and go, "Where are you finding these poets?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in Austin." So we have this amazing wealth of talent, right?
And Ernie posted some MP3s on the Austin Poetry Slam website. Mm-hmm. Like in 1998 or something. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, a lot of that stuff was available. I once got a fan letter from Alaska. It was it was like, I think it was, it was an email, but they had sent it to the website. So it went to Ernie, and then he sent it to me. And it was, "Hey, I was in my car and the college radio DJ had found the Austin Poetry Slam website and played some MP3s. And I really like this one, you know, and I was like, wow, that's so great, you know, and
that's awesome.
Yeah. It's not just, you know, be a Stephen King or nothing. There's a bunch of middle levels there.
Well, you know, Austin Kleon, so he's local to Austin as well, and I'm sure we've all read his works. And he talks about the idea of a scenius, right? Like how we're influenced by the people who are in our scene. And I think definitely the Austin Poetry Slam was that. There were some amazing writers churned out because of that energy of that scenius together. So. I do want to say you are sort of a master of all genres. You've got your poetry, but you've written educational content, songs, stories, and you are working on a mystery novel now. Is that right?
I am. And so what some of my teachers in high school would they would not have said, you know, master of all genres. They would have said lacks focus. I finished the first draft. It's a murder mystery set in the world of Austin craft beer.
Oh, wow.
And the people who enjoy Bella and Blue will be interested to know that a very fun, goofy, lovable Great Dane is one of the heroes of my story.
Amazing.
I'm done with the first draft. I've gotten beta reader feedback I still have to incorporate. And I went to a writers conference pretty recently called Killer Nashville. And it's where a lot of people who maybe they've published a novel or two and they want to try out new work in front of agents, or maybe like me, you've never published a novel through like a real press and you're hoping to find an agent. This was my put my toe in the water time. I'll go back next year and try to really get an agent when I've got a second draft and I've learned more things. But it was great. And so many people, one of the themes I found was people in their 50s and 60s who are thinking about the last act and, you know, what am I going to do now? I've got an empty nest. Now I'm either close to retirement or I'm there, and I have this itch to connect with people through my work, but not be at the 40 or 50 hour beck and call of the man of a corporate job. And several people I met, and most of them were women, were my age or even a little older. And I'm 61, so I'm almost at that point where I can break out of a corporate job and retire and just see if I can make something get going on the creative side. But they had gotten first books published and gotten some reviews and were thinking about if they wanted to do a new standalone or carry their character into a new book for a second book for a series. And there were great conversations to have with these people who, when we think of writing as a young person's game, right?
But it's not.
The lightning bolt of inspiration strikes and 22-year-old Bob Dylan is on top of the world. And that's the exception, right? And most people give it up. Most people, it competes badly to go work on your villanelle when you've got to get some mac and cheese on the table,
right? Exactly.
And that maybe the dog pooped in the house, and you've got to get, you got work that you didn't finish at work that day, and you're gonna have to talk to your boss about it tomorrow. But for a bunch of us, we make the space to keep our creative life alive. And that's been the case for me. I know it's the case for you. As you know, my wife, Tony, is an actress, and she retired from the state. And with that pension was able to not have to sweat contributing to our household economy. She's like, no, you've done enough. You've worked there long and you got a pension, and, no guilt there. Pursue your art. And she's killing it as an actress. It's super inspiring to me.
It's amazing to get to see her almost everywhere now. And I love that. It's a super inspiration to go, once the kids are a little older, once my son's a little older, maybe I'll get back on stage too. Because she is such a great example of that.
And that spark that we have that led us to want to be around the arts as younger people, that doesn't have to die. That can stay alive as long as we're drawing breath. And so that's my hope with the novelist, that I'll retire from my corporate job in a few years or maybe even sooner. And I don't have to make a great middle-class living as a successful novelist on the bestseller list to be able to do it at all. I can develop these characters and tell these stories and hopefully connect with people. And if it makes even a little bit of money, I mean,
then it's a bonus, right? Yeah.
Then it's a bonus. I don't have to go be a Walmart greeter then or whatever.
Right. So I have found that once I transitioned into playwriting, so I had been on stage and then I was a poetry major and then I was like, wait, what? I guess I do write good dialogue, and I fell into playwriting. And I have found that it's a lot of older adults now who maybe have some experience and some time and don't have to rely on the money because you're not going to be a rich playwright. And to hear these amazing plays and stories coming from older adults is amazing. Because you're right, we do think it's for younger people, but you got to live a little to have something to talk about.
Yeah. At the Slam, I was a really late bloomer. So I was going to be an academic, and I had done songwriting off and on in my 20s, maybe even late teens into 20s. But I had always thought, I bet I could find my voice as a poet or writing essays or writing fiction. And I just didn't do it for a long time because I was ensconced in academia. I wanted to be an academic writer and get a PhD and go be a professor somewhere. And for a variety of reasons, I wound up not following that path. But when I started writing poems and going to open mics, I was 30, 31.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was really the birth of my oldest son, Dylan, that prompted it, I think. Some of the first stuff that I wrote that was worth keeping or worth digging in on, not just, I've had this idea, but then I never follow up on it. But I did follow up and revised a few drafts and came up with something good. And it was in the rush of new fatherhood that started for me. But that's really late. I mean, most of the people that are your and my kind of people had a little poetry journal when they were 12.
Right.
and never quit keeping those journals, right?
But yeah, I the thing is, I think I don't know if there is a late start. I think just whenever the time is right, that's when the words are going to find their way out of you,
Yeah.
And I do think, so it's super interesting you talk about parenthood, because I talked about this with another playwright the other day. She's a brand new mom, and we talk about, I suddenly, as a parent, had less time to write, but more energy to write, if that made sense. I suddenly saw the world. Oh, wow, the world is way more vast than I thought it was, because there's this whole other person I made. So yeah, that's super interesting. Well, okay, so on that topic, I have to tell you, I mean, I was a fan of yours for years, and being in Austin, we have had a ton of mutual friends, but sort of like ships passing. I never got to meet you. And then in the middle of the pandemic, Paul had this serious health issue, and we were all isolated, and he needed emergency surgery, and I had this young son at home, and I basically had to drop Paul off at the hospital and be like, please don't die. And it was it was super hard for our family, and it was hard on Kai. So sure. I remembered that you had this poem, Peyote, which is beautiful and calm, and it has this line about how minutes erase miles. And I told you this, but for everyone else, it's like I use that line to calm my son when he was so worried about his dad coming home. And I tell him the final line, when you string together enough minutes to erase enough miles, you're going to find yourself home again. And I would tell him, so every minute that passes, he's a little closer to home. And he loved that. It changed his whole world. He stopped crying and he felt a little bit in control. And now I'm sure, when you were writing about this peyote trip, the last thing you thought was, hey, this poem's going to help some little kid one day when he hears it. But it totally did. And I think that's what's so magical about writing. And so thank you for existing and for writing. You literally changed our world that day.
And that was fantastic for me when I can't remember who first reached out to me. And
I think it was
said,
Karen.
I think you might be right, but I heard from several people the same day, so I can't remember who was first, but yeah. But it was like, absolutely, and I, was able to get you a copy of the poem, and it's just so validating, when I was doing some therapy a couple of years ago, and it was about being super frustrated with aspects of my job that I thought were going to be more creative than they turned out to be. And I had this identity crisis, like I was just angry all the time. Like I'm a fraud. Like I'm not a real writer because I took this job and it was going to be a victory lap for my career. And then it turned out not to be at all what was advertised. And it was much more kind of by the numbers and just, it was like, my sense of identity was invalidated as a human being because of that job. And then during the pandemic, it's worse because you're working from home. So it's not like, okay, fine, I go there and I do these things and then I come home and that's mine. Like, nope, it's the same office where I'm doing this job that I don't love, is where I'm hypothetically supposed to do my creative work. But anyway, in my therapy journey, I love that phrase, my therapy journey. At some point, my shrink said, so you just want to what? Do creative work just to do creative work? And it was in that conversation that I really had the revelation of, no, it's to connect with people.
Right.
It's that something that came from me in a real way, not something that anybody could have done, but something that really came from me was useful or good, or a moment of entertainment and relief or laughter or insight, anything for somebody else, so that the work doesn't just live in my head, but what I have to offer is of value to somebody in the way that I'll feel good about too. And so that was, and that's, by the way, my writing my novel came out of that therapy session. It was like, what you need is a big, juicy writing project that's yours and you're driving it. And it really does come from you. And it's not just, following the instructions for how to do course authoring and evolve. But that moment that you and I connected around the peyote poem, and the fact that it was helpful for Kai, meant the world to me. It was just, wow. It feels like everything we do is, written on water, the next wave, and it's gone. And it might as well never have happened. But in those moments of connections, no, it really did matter that you did that work.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's what's so great about storytelling. That's what's so great about writing. All of it is the influences we're having, seen and unseen. We're not just shouting into a void. We are truly connecting with other people. So, well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It was amazing chatting with you. You're, again, one of our favorite writers, and you are welcome back anytime. We are literally some of your biggest fans. I'm not exaggerating when I say that.
Well, wow. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I'm thrilled to be on here. I'm thrilled to be having this actual conversation with you. Now we've been virtual friends for a while, but to be actually having a conversation and it's great. And I'm delighted to have sort of found this corner of the storytelling world and the short play world that you've done so much to promote and invigorate. And I'll be sticking around for sure.
Yay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We know you love Stories Found, but have you ever sat and wondered, wow, how can I let other people know just how much I love Stories Found? Well, fortunately, we're here to help. Head over to storiesfound.com/support. We've got a list of fun, free, or even paid ways to show your support and to help us keep paying our amazingly talented writers and actors. Soon, the whole world will know just how much you love comedy and supporting the arts. Head over to storiesfound.com/support. Stories Found is now proud to present Bella and Blue by Jeff Knight.
This is a story about two dogs and one song. In 2015, my family adopted two Great Dane dogs, Bella and Blue. The way that this happened was that the owner had fallen into pretty bad health, and we were looking for a dog, and he, in the ad that he had posted, said, "My health is declining. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to take care of these two dogs." And they're really bonded. So to do right by them, while I still can, I want to get them adopted together to a loving family. And that turned out to be our family. The dogs were tremendous. Bella was about 135 pounds, and Blue was 150 and change. And they also had tremendous personalities. Bella, chattiest dog I've ever known. She would just walk around the house, muttering to herself all the time. Matter of fact, when I first met Bella, she scared me because when this 135-pound dog came approaching me going, the fight or flight adrenaline was tugging at my sleeve like, have we thought this through? Is this a good idea? But it turned out she just had a lot to say. In fact, she was a little bit musical with it. As she would walk around the house muttering to herself, she would fluctuate tones. So there'd be a little melodic component, you know. And we were endlessly amused at what a good singer Bella was, quite the vocal stylist. Blue, on the other hand, had total stoner surfer dude vibe. His face was kind of jowly and just, you know, loose and relaxed. He made me think of the dude from The Big Lebowski. All the time he would look at me as if in his world it was 421. And his attitude was always like, that's just like your opinion, man. And we fell in love with the dogs. The dogs were great. And Blue was not chill about food. Most food-motivated dog you can imagine. And for a dog his size, the gracefulness of his leaping, frolicking, prancing dance whenever there was a treat was a shocker. And as I think we all do, I started making up songs for the dogs. Blue and Bella, Bella and Blue. There's not too much these dogs can't do. Bella can sing and Blue can dance, and he'll steal your cookie if he gets a chance. And this is just the kind of silly thing that we all do. I do it. I know you probably do it. We make up little songs for our animals, and we forget them, and then we make up 10 more. But this song stuck. It caught on in my house. We all started singing it, and it became kind of a hit. In fact, one day, a friend of ours came over so that her kid could have a play date with my kid, who was in elementary school at the time. And she wanted to come in and meet the Danes. And I said, sure, come on in. And she came in and she met them, and she was amazed by them, as everyone was, partly by their sweetness and their playfulness, but partly just by their size. They seemed kind of like CGI. When you first would meet them, they're just tremendous. And she was playing with the dogs and marveling over how great they are. And I said, hey, you want to hear my song? I wrote a song about Bella and Blue. And she said, oh, I already know the song, and started singing it to me. And I said, how can you possibly already know this song? We just got these dogs. And she said, well, you sang it and earwormed your kid with it. He came to school and earwormed my kid with it. My kid came home from school singing the song, and now our whole house is like, Blue and Bella, Bella and Blue, not too much these dogs can't do. And I was like, I wrote a hit. It's great. It's not the kind of hit I thought I would write maybe someday, but I'll take it. Songwriting is something I've really revere, and I've studied it all my life. I started writing songs with friends in college, and I read interviews with songwriters. I noticed the craft of it and how they're put together, and even worked professionally for a while. I was working for a multimedia curriculum company, writing Schoolhouse Rock type songs for 6th, 7th, 8th graders. And I don't mean to brag, but my song about the foreign policy challenges in the John Adams administration, kind of a banger. And and yet I had not had anything like Bella and Blue before. I would host music gatherings at my house and play the song, and everybody would sing along. I would go to song circles and people would sing along with the song. It always went over great. Singer-songwriter open mics like at the Cactus Cafe. Oh man, I like that song about the dogs. And Pete Seeger says there are two kinds of famous songs. There's the famous songs on the radio, And there are the songs that maybe they're not as profound, but they're on the top 40 countdown in our regular lives. And Bella and Blue turned out to be that kind of song. Songwriting can do amazing things. It can speak to deep, powerful themes. If you're thinking about a hard time in your life and you demand to be treated with respect, you know what I'm talking about. When there are times in my life when I've had a hard time accepting things and I learned to just let it be. You know what I'm saying? And maybe there have been times in your life when you were stuck in a pattern that was self-defeating and you said, finally, we're never, ever getting back together. Right? These are songs that swing for the fence, that try to hit a home run and make reality and truth rhyme, make it melodic, make it deep. But the other kind of hit song that Pete Seeger's talking about, there's a word for it, and it's quotidian. I really like the word. Quotidian means the quality of ordinariness, the quality of dailiness. If you're talking about the quotidian pleasures of life, it's not sunset at the Grand Canyon. It's how good that first cup of coffee tastes on a Monday morning when you don't want to have to go to work. And it's the little pleasures. And Bella and Blue was a song like that. It was also endlessly repeatable and addable to, as we would find new observations about the dogs. I don't know how much you know about Great Danes, but they have kind of a pyramid of bone on top of their skulls. It comes up in this ridge, and it's like a mountain peak that they just carry around up there all the time. And Blue, who already had a huge head, the ridge of bone on top of his skull was seriously impressive. And his head was just like really heavy, man. And we observed that when Blue would be standing beside Bella, he might just lean over and flop his head onto her back to rest it a while. He just put his chin right there to get that gravity and weight off of him, and Bella would very sweetly allow it. Thus, Bella turned to me one day and said, Blue's gargantuan boulder head is way too big to fit on the bed. Sometimes he'll rest it on me instead. Oh, Bella and Blue. And on the verses went. As new observations would happen, the song would just be added to, and it became part of the musical life of our household. These dogs were 5 years old when we adopted them, and Great Danes don't live that long anyway, so we knew how the story would end. There came a morning that Blue didn't want to eat his breakfast, and so we knew that was trouble. We hurried him to the vet, and they found that he was bleeding internally from a splenetic tumor, and we had to say a sad and sweet goodbye to our little boy Blue, and that was hard on all of us for quite a while, and particularly Bella. But Bella had good things in store. If you ask, what do Great Danes want to do? The answer is, whatever you want to do. That's what they want to do. Hike the Appalachian Trail? Heck yeah, let's go. Lay on the couch all day long and don't move and watch every episode of BoJack Horseman? 100% down for that. The dogs just want to do whatever you do. So there could not have been a better treat in store for Bella the Great Dane than the deadly global COVID pandemic that struck the world. She was in Danish paradise. Work from home, school from home. The people never leave. If they go out at all, it's like for a curbside pickup. It's not to like go really explore the store. And she got a lot of walks and a lot of sweetness. I would be on work calls through my job, and she would bark when the mail came, and my colleagues would be like, "Hey, dude, your mail's here." She even got attention through the computer, is what I'm saying. So it was a nice long last run of it for Bella. But of course, the time came when she left us as well, and both of our giants had moved on to whatever comes next. But they left us with this sweet, silly song that is meaningful in capturing this chapter of our lives where they took up a lot of real estate in our hearts, and I can bring them back like that anytime. Blue and Bella, Bella and Blue, it's not too much these dogs can't do. Bella can sing and Blue can dance, and he'll steal your cookie if he gets a chance. Oh, Bella and Blue. Thanks.
You've just heard Bella and Blue by Jeff Knight. This version of Bella and Blue was recorded at the live storytelling show Testify in Austin, Texas. It's produced by Ladi Loera and recorded by Mark Gifford. We'll have a post on our website with more information about this episode and how you can read more of Jeff's work. You can find all of that on storiesfound.com. Thanks for listening to Stories Found. We've been your hosts, Ava Love Hannah and Paul Hannah. Get more info about this week's episode, subscribe to our newsletter, or submit your own story and be a featured storyteller in a future episode. You can do all that and more on our website, storiesfound.com. Stories Found was recorded at ELA Studios deep in the heart of Austin, Texas.